Welcome to Good News, Bad News, the Libertarian Christian Roundtable, where every other week we challenge the status quo and give you the Libertarian Christian analysis of what's happening in your world.
All right, welcome back to Good News, Bad News, the Libertarian Christian Institute's project where we talk about the news of the day. Today, we are talking about Twitter. We're talking about Disney. We're talking about all sorts of crazy crap. With me today, I have Carrie Baldwin and Mr. Sepulveda himself. I'm Dr. Norman Horn. And we are Good News, Bad News, folks. So, guys, this is it's good to be back with you again on this ridiculous evening. What a strange week this has been. I do want to make one note before we get into the news. I guess it's really quite worthy to note that we have lost a leading light in the libertarian movement this week. And so I would be remiss not to point out that no longer with us is our own David Thoreau. David Thoreau is the former president, I guess we should say former now, of the Independent Institute. He was one of the founding members of the organization, as well as the leader of one of the founders of the C.S. Lewis Society of California. The man is just a tremendous fella, and I wrote a little blog post about him. It was posted this morning on the LCI website. There's far more better recollections of him that were written for the Independent Institute and the C.S. Lewis Society of California. Please go to those websites and check him out. David was been a good friend of mine I've known him for longer than I have known both of these two weirdos combined in years. And he's a great guy and a wonderful friend, and we will miss him very much. So our heart goes out to Mary, his wife, and his family. But it's kind of worthy to kind of keep talking about him here while we still can. But David was an advisory board member to LCI and had been since the beginning of since we got started on that, and just a wonderful fella. And so we're going to miss him. Anyway, just wanted to say that. But now on to the news. Unless you've been living under a rock this week, then you probably know that one of the biggest weird pieces of news you could have possibly imagined is actually coming to fruition, which is that terms were reached between Elon Musk and Twitter for the entire buyout of Twitter and taking it private, which is crazy to think about.
Yep.
Guys, what do you think? This is is this Batman coming to save us, or is this something else?
Well, I almost thought it wasn't going to happen. Like I was for a little bit there. I was like, I don't think this is going to actually happen. But then it did, and I was quite surprised. But taking it private, that means it's not going to be publicly traded, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. So. I mean, it's interesting because now it's going to be an actual private social media platform. And
well, I mean, all of these platforms start off as private. They don't all immediately. I mean, Facebook was private before it was public. And
right,
so on.
Yeah.
I mean, these types of liquidity events are the way in which investors try to make back their money, and to have something like that to be part of that's the exit strategy, right? So this is an interesting kind of exit of the exit strategy on some level, because it wasn't valued at the 45 billion or whatever. Is either somewhere, was it 44 46 billion that it's being bought out? I think it was
44. 44.
So at 44, it's like the price per share is a hilarious $50 plus $4.20, so 54.20. All right, Elon, I get you. You're funny. So.
Well, it's interesting because I've been on Twitter more in the past couple of days than I usually am, and it's pretty lively right now.
Yeah.
There are
people didn't like it. Came in.
Yeah.
Bunch.
There are some people who have left Twitter for Social Media Canada, I guess, and
for what?
Social Media Canada. This whole thing, the question has been like, is if Elon Musk buys Twitter, I'm leaving Twitter. The new if president if Trump becomes president, I'm moving to Canada.
Moving to Canada.
I've seen people posting that
what about we're leaving, or some type of like, and every single tweet of Elon as of late, there's always even the same people posting again that they're gonna leave, and then they're gonna leave, and they're gonna leave, and I think they don't understand that it was already purchased, I guess. And,
well, it's not. Well, technically, it's not purchased yet. I mean,
No?
the agreement has been reached, but it's still, it's still contingent upon due diligence. And there's even a poison pill clause, I think is what they call it. Like if Elon backs out, then like he owes Twitter like $1 billion or something. It's
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, he's doing the paperwork done for the loan to be transferred to the owners, to the stockholders of Twitter.
Yeah. So in these M&A types of operations, mergers and acquisition. So for the uninitiated, in M&A like this, what you tend to do is you reach an agreement on price before you execute a due diligence operation, because that's also a non-trivial expense. So you're not going to do that until you have some agreement in place between the parties that that if we go through this, I'm going to go, like, we're going to continue to go through with this. Like, so it's contingent contracts at that point. So that's typically why there are exit clauses or poison pill clauses such as these, so that if one party decides to pull out, that the party that is at greater risk is compensated for it. Like that's the way these things work.
Right.
And they're not always publicized as highly as something like this, but so to say that like, oh, Elon bought Twitter, well, not technically yet. I still have 24 shares of Twitter that I have not been bought out of yet. And you can still buy shares of Twitter right now on this open stock market. So it's not done, but it's there's stages that it could take upwards of anywhere from 4 to 6 months potentially to continue to go through the whole process. But nonetheless, I mean, I think what's interesting too is that if you were confused as to whether or not Twitter was a leftist bastion and was getting to the point of insanity, just look at the responses of the leftists to it. I mean, that is very telling, that they're concerned that, oh, we're not that they're going to get censored, but it's just going to be different. Because the whole point is that, like,
they're
Elon
literally concerned that you're going to be able to say whatever you want to say on Twitter.
So it is absolutely wonderful to watch how their demonstrated preferences are now out in the open.
They're concerned that they're not going to be able to use that. Now they have to use their block feature more.
Right.
I was like, I mean, it's like literally that's the whole point. I mean,
well, that's what's stupid about it, is that they
you don't have to deal with anybody that you don't like. Like Twitter's very.
Well, they already know this.
Like just simple. Like you don't like somebody, just block them in the Twitter.
Block them.
The one that is
Block
expert,
them,
that is
goodbye.
Malice, he blocks you just because, let's say, he's making a joke and someone doesn't know him, and they're making a joke about that person. If you kind of let them know, that he blocks you right away because he likes his tweet feed to be like specifically designed that way, and then so he just blocks people, and that's it. End of the story.
Yeah.
You ever heard that that classic phrase? Maybe it is about Puritans, that that Puritanism is the desperate fear that somewhere, somehow, somebody is having fun, or something like that. I may be getting that kind of wrong. I'm sure that's been said about Baptists and various denominations and whatnot. But I think it is funny because that's what the new wokeness is. Like wokeism is the new Puritanism. Because it is the desperate and horrific fear that somewhere, somehow, somebody is saying something they don't like. It's madness, and it's kind of it's appropriately called a mind virus at times, and I think it's interesting. But this is again where, this is their demonstrated preferences are coming out. They're all out in the open. Everything that was hidden is now revealed. Like it's I mean, it wasn't really hidden to begin with, but now it's just extra revealed because now they're concerned that their power is going to wane as a result.
I wonder if this is going to impact other social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Is it going to somehow incentivize them to cut out their censorship crap?
because people are going to be
question.
leaving.
Yeah,
because I think in my opinion, and this is based on the response of like lots of people coming back to Twitter, you know, I'm looking into using it a lot more. That means that Twitter could become much more viable and therefore competitive. And so I'm wondering what the impact will be with platforms like Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. Because, you know, before with the whole censorship thing, it was like all of the major social media platforms were kind of all in agreement. They were going to start censoring certain content. And, you know, so there wasn't really a place you could go without risk getting, you know.
There's the only competition that was somewhat serious, if you want to call it serious, will be Telegram. But, you know, the amount of users was very small.
Yeah, well, and all of the new platforms that came up just never really took off in any significant way. So I'm kind of wondering if...
So, let me bring this one up. I kind of knew that Elon was going to go through it because I did the math, and the price of Twitter is like 16% of his wealth. That honestly, that is a luxury that he can give himself. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean,
so
it's still
non-trivial.
Like it's a big. I mean, think about even just the fallout of even this announcement. I mean, we've seen in the past 2 to 3 weeks alone a decrease in the price of Tesla stock by like 12 to 15%. So that evaporates, you know, billions off of his net worth, technically. Now, granted, that's paper losses. You know, can't lose if you don't sell, as we say.
Right.
But nonetheless, like that's on paper loss. That's, I mean, it's non-trivial. But, yeah,
he went to like 1,000 to 800, I think. Let me see.
Yeah.
1 month. So, we have had this 1 month, and so it has been 20% down. So let's say another 40 million paper loss, and then later it's gonna go up. So
yeah, I mean, but Elon doesn't do things stupidly. I mean, like you have to love him or hate him. Like what you can't really do is say, well, he's just a dummy. Like that man is. I've kind of come full circle on Elon. I used to really not like him, and in part of it is that I was, you know, I didn't appreciate certain things about the way he did business and whatnot. And there's certain things I would say still probably disagree with him on, but I've kind of come circle on a bunch of aspects of the way he's done this. And he's, no matter what though, I mean, never have I thought the man is dumb.
Right. Yeah.
So I like I have observed people say things like, oh, he's just doing this because he doesn't like Elon Jet, the Twitter account that's like tracking his private plane, or, you know, or he's just doing this because he thinks he's going to pump Dogecoin again or something like that. And it's just like, I don't think you understand the way he thinks at all. Like it's very strange to see that come out of people. Like you really miss
all Twitter had to do was to leave the bee alone, and everything would have been just the same as usual. But
the Babylon bee.
But see, like we laugh, but it's because we know that that's the joke. Like it's not. Right. He didn't do this because they banned Babylon bee or something. Right. He didn't. But he's not doing this. No, I mean it was triggering. Contributing factor, sure. I wouldn't deny that, but it's like I think that's part of the milieu of things that are indicators to him that Twitter is something that it should not be, and that it could be so much better. That's obviously what's motivating him. He honestly believes, and that there is a real way in which Twitter should be more valuable than $44 billion. That's what he believes. Because he's putting his money where his mouth is in this respect. He believes that it should be a different type of force than what it is, and that if it were it had greater capacity to actually be a free speech zone, if you will.
And it's interesting It's interesting that, Twitter's original creator, Jack Dorsey, is super excited about
Oh yeah.
Elon. Yeah, Elon
Well,
buying it out.
that one's kind of, I thought it was kind of odd because he's going to have to sell, but it really doesn't matter because he's not even the CEO anymore. So he's in
Right.
he's in his side. So he has no reason to be happy about it because he's irrelevant right now. So I guess he's just,
Well,
he's cool.
maybe not from a financial standpoint. I don't know, but his tweets have been favorable towards what his intention for the platform was, and he thinks that Elon is carrying that out.
But by the way, I think we do need to mention a little bit what we were discussing about the Amazon against what was the name of the case? Amazon against
Oh,
that
Overdove.
you're gonna need to explain that because that's a bit
complex.
Complex, yeah.
But I think that's gonna be the talk for a long time.
So this is the case, and I don't know if I'm going to get this exactly correct, but this is a case that basically allows
Overdove versus Amazon.
So it allows the company that is like hosting the app to get sued for, whatever, what is it, violations of like hate speech or whatnot, if Twitter doesn't enforce it. So if Twitter doesn't enforce community standards on hate speech, then this court case would allow Apple, for example, or perhaps Android, Google Play, I guess, to be sued.
Yeah, they're held liable.
Yeah, they're held
for
liable.
Damages caused by dangerous speech of a kind.
Yeah.
So what happened in that case was a person bought something from Amazon from a secondary seller just through Amazon, but because that came damaged and it actually damaged this person's eyes, it was able to go to court and take Amazon because they were the intermediary, so the intermediary could actually get, and the whole point is like, no, yeah, he can, for whatever the reason it is. Therefore, they're transferring that to say, okay, yeah, sure, whatever happens on Twitter, they cannot take Twitter to court because they're protected by the law that is like 230 something. I don't know exactly what the name is.
Section 230.
Section
230. That one, they're protected. That they're not liable for it. But everyone around Twitter, it's liable for whatever happens on Twitter if they somehow do business with Twitter. So Apple has to just get rid of the app, otherwise they will be liable for whatever happens. It's not Twitter that gets liable, but it's Apple that gets liable, and Android and whatever. Play
well,
Store.
and I wonder if that can be resolved. I wonder if that can be resolved by just making the app something that you pay for, because then you're buying it and you can have a terms of service or whatever. And I wonder if that could be a way to circumvent, because right now it's free.
I don't think so. I hope so, but I doubt it that that's possible, because the law it's super strange. Like, okay, no, you're not liable, but everyone around you, if you ever talk to anybody, you make them comments of whatever happens on Twitter. Like the entire world is
court cases.
I don't know.
The litigious society, I guess.
Insane.
It's very strange. I would like, I wish we had a better example of kind of the possibilities that are enabled by this case. It's not clear to me.
Picture. Yeah, it's super difficult to picture.
Yeah.
Just to know, like, whatever happens.
Well, and it doesn't make sense because, every social media platform has a way to block. Like, if somebody is really harassing you or just saying things you don't like and, whatever, it doesn't even matter. They can be completely harmless to you. You can still block them. I don't see why it's even an issue. It's like, okay, that person said something that you don't like or is wrong about or you consider hateful, like, block them. that nobody needs to be sued over this.
I have gotten pre-blocked many times, by the way.
But there are forms of speech that do get litigated against, right? There's libel, there is slander. I mean, there are things that can be, problem, but that are even before there was concepts of hate speech and whatnot, which is weird, per se. I mean, but there were ways in which speech could get litigated against. So the question is, what liability does the platform have to enabling, because of their enabling of certain forms of speech to be more widely spread?
As far as I understand, they have no liability. The problem is everyone around.
Yeah. So what does that mean? So it's very confusing. It's
everyone
very
with
confusing.
Money around. Everyone that has money around is liable.
All right.
Yeah.
I think it's ridiculous.
So
well, it is. There's a lot of foundationally ridiculous things about it, and as many have argued in the libertarian community, you don't have a right to a reputation per se.
Right.
Like those are not things that are that doesn't
ownable.
That's not an ownable thing.
Right.
And therefore, since it is not a scarce resource per se, it is not something with which we can reliably come up with a rights-based conflict around. And so and so on and so forth. I mean, these are not, they're non-controversial in libertarian circles, at least. So.
Right. Once again, property rights solves the problem.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, it solves the legal problem. It doesn't mean that you won't come into conflict with people or come into, disagreements with people, but those are not rights issues at that point, and therefore outside of the purview of libertarian theory at that stage.
Yeah.
Do you know what's part of libertarian theory? Mosquitoes. Part of libertarian theory.
Wait, you might please explain
to the issue. Okay. So,
this is one heck of a segue.
Audience,
this is Doug level segue here.
I was practicing all day long.
You can tell. I can tell.
I was like imitating Doug, and I went to my wife and said, "Let me imitate Doug."
Well,
I practice. But you know what? Okay. I even lost track of this. Oh, okay.
The mosquitoes.
To our beloved audience, it's gonna sound like we like Disney, but we don't. Okay. So everything from here on is going to be interpreted as purely descriptive, not normative. Okay, we're not saying this is good people. We're talking about how bad people behave, and we should imitate. We should be wise like the serpent, but not like a dove. Right? We have to imitate. Okay, so
okay, Pastor Sepulveda.
There you go. Now, what's so important about property rights? Property rights solve all the problems. Political problems, including mosquitoes. Why is it that there are no mosquitoes in Disney? Why? Because it's a private entity, and in a private entity, there are actually losses. If you actually have a bunch of mosquitoes bothering your customers, you get to lose. The opportunity cost is huge. Politicians don't care how nice public spaces are when they're paid with tax dollars, but when it's private, there's a huge opportunity cost. So I was going through all the benefits of having a private entity. And therefore, so for example, is everything that you need when you go to Disneyland is completely covered. Everything's available. Every public resource that you need on infrastructure is there. It can be private, and that's perfectly fine. Now, that shows to Christians that we can privatize everything, and we use it for the glory of God instead of whatever secular stuff they do over there.
So just for some context for the people listening who don't know why we're talking about Disney.
Yeah, let's back this up.
Let's back it up just a little bit, because it's Disney World in Florida, right?
Yep.
They've had their tax status changed thanks to the legislature. And this is very interesting because basically Disney World acts as its own governing entity. And Norm had mentioned off air that there's some potential constitutional ramifications or questions, implications that need to be explored. But essentially, Disney World operates as its own little private country. They have their own mode of self-governance. And so they're able to do a whole lot of things that a lot of other corporations aren't able to do. So that's the context. Now,
but I guess
we don't like Disney because of the things that they are defending at the moment.
Sometimes we don't like Disney.
Sometimes we don't like
They're
Disney.
They're a mixed
bag. They are a mixed bag. Right now, they're defending some things that are unsavory. But at any rate, the whole issue over their tax status is really interesting because they are a private entity. They do have this private governance. They've been able to operate freely. And so at any rate, that's sort of the context and background.
Well,
and they're a private community.
Right. Private community.
And I guess, so like, let's back it up even more because, where did this all start and how did this devolve into this strange situation? And we're not talking about like the foundations of Disney, but rather like what's been happening in the last couple of weeks. Okay. So we know that there was a bill that was being passed in Florida that was going to prevent schools in Florida from having they're basically going to be prohibited from teaching, subjects of sexuality to like what, pre-K through
third, I think.
Second grade. It was like second or third. I
mean,
kids that by no reasonable definition should have exposure to, topics of sexuality from anybody other than their parents. That if they're going to be learning about that, it needs to be from their parents and not from their schools. Like that seems somewhat non-controversial when you think about that. Generally speaking, if an adult is approaching a child about some type of sexual topic and it's not their parents, you tend to think of them as like, a potential like predator.
Yeah.
Okay. But I guess if it's the government doing it, it's fine or whatever. Okay. Bull crap.
The law require the agents of the state to do less for your kids so that you do more for your own kids.
Yeah. So, and whether or not like, I think there's some questionable aspects to whether or not that this is like the kind of thing that the state should be doing in the first place. And, we've talked about this in the past, and my issue is somewhat on the aspect of like this. It kind of begs the question to begin with on the aspect of like, why should the state be doing any of this at all? Right. And so, that's okay. But nonetheless, at least from the basic point of view, it still stands that it's not something that teachers should be teaching in that realm. Like it's just not. Okay. So I'm not disputing that at all. Okay. That's the start. At first, Disney was actually not going to say anything about this. They literally said this, in fact, from their leadership. But then their employees started rebelling. And for some weird reason, the leadership decided to cave, which is like the leadership starts off saying, you know what, we're not going to get political on this. We're just not, that's not our purview. But then somehow they decided that because of the outcry from their employees,
it's so weird. It's so what?
So that got weird to begin with.
Right.
And then
they made a public statement because employees were pushing.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's key, guys, because the Week came out with an article saying the problem with wokeism in corporate in corporate world, it's the employees. It's neither the owners of the business nor the customers of the business.
Yeah.
But the employees are the ones pushing that, and then the owners gonna cave because you need workers to be functioning.
But that's the weird. That's even the weird thing. This isn't like. I mean, I know that there were teachers that spoke out against the bill, but why the heck is Disney employees getting upset about a bill related to public school?
Because they've been trained that they have to be activists 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, it's very strange. Like, there's got to be a lot of weird dynamics there. Because the way they spun on that whole topic from being like, we're not going to be political on this to, okay, we're going to actually lever resources on this topic is like, whoa, that was quite an about face. Mm-hmm. And as a result, this kind of prompted some different kind of pushback from the Florida legislature and Ron DeSantis in particular. Now, if I were to make a guess on the politicking that was going on behind the scenes, it is possible that there's more to this than meets the eye, that it might have seemed like because there's some aspects on this special governing district that could fall potentially in the favor of Disney from one perspective, but we can get into that later. But if I were to make a guess, discounting that, this is a move from DeSantis toward like building credibility for a 2024 presidential run. I think that's like very real possibility here, that he's trying to build credibility of I'm like, if he hadn't done something like does he see this as an opportunity to score some points? Even if it didn't work out, like, well, it's kind of like what happens when, the left at the federal level, they decide they're going to try to push a bill to try and tax unrealized gains. It's like, they know it's not going to work.
Right.
But they're going to do it because it scores them points.
They were the champions.
I was the champion of it. I mean, I tried to do something, and whatnot. So that's their reelection bid. And in this case, is it something to where he's like, well, this is, even if it doesn't work, then I score points. I think it's possible. I think it's very realistically possible. Because I mean, DeSantis almost assuredly has presidential aspirations at this point. I think it's pretty much a given. So what's going on? So the strike back against Disney is one to basically say, like, well, because it's very strategic. They're saying Disney gets this special tax status, and we should be against this. Everybody needs. I've literally heard DeSantis say, I watched a clip of him on Tucker basically say that, well, everybody needs to be playing by the same rules. That's why we should eliminate this tax status. Like, oh, so now, okay, so you were told over the course of your governor's tenure here, it's only now that it's like, now we need to play by the same rules. It's like, really? Okay, but
wasn't
why
like that during COVID?
So yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and there's a limitation to what this means now. So what are they trying to repeal? The special tax status that Disney has is kind of like they're kind of like their own private city, in as much as they can make the rules regarding kind of like zoning, regarding how roads are built, what stuff is allowed to be built in the areas of where they operate. They can, so they're able to kind of they have a greater measure of control than the average corporation would have over a geographical area. Like that's kind of what it is. So they have a lot more ability to work around zoning and permits and whatnot, and do things that ultimately work well for their situation. And so this is something that's interesting, is that this is something that has been heralded as a model of privatization, even amongst libertarians. I mean,
times.
Yeah, I mean, like this whole thing about, why are there no mosquitoes in Disney? Well, it's because they're private, and so on and so forth. We've seen this, and we've heralded this as being like a good thing, that we should see more of this. It's interesting to see the funny backlash now is like, some people are so anti-woke at this point, and okay, it's good to be, I'm cool with being anti-woke, but they see that they're willing to take this repeal is like, well, they deserved it or something like that. It's like,
yeah, well, they're focused on the,
short term.
They're focused on the immediate problem, which is why are those weirdos defending a bill that allows teachers to talk to children about sex? Like, that's weird. So
and they should get excoriated for it, I guess, but
yeah, they should, but they're not making the connection, right? Because politics has become this thing where you use the state to get back at the people that you don't like.
It's just power, naked power.
Yeah, and so it doesn't even matter what principles are being followed, it just doesn't matter.
And it's also notable that like this could come back and even bite DeSantis as a result, because I think it's, there are definite constitutional issues involved in that if they are being targeted for essentially their speech, is this, does this fall under like a First Amendment type issue? Because make no mistake, there is there is an ability to speak out on these things from corporate sides. Like right. Is this a free speech issue at that point? Can this get litigated in court and, and as a constitutional issue, and Disney come out on top because the state of Florida has targeted them? Because that's the thing, is like they legislated away this special tax zone essentially.
Right.
So is that even like part of the contract? Was that ever, is the agreement that was set forth between the state of Florida or whatever and Disney in order to establish this zone able to just be legislated away?
Wouldn't it be great though if, if litigation did actually sort of open up the doors for other people to understand how it is that Disney was able to have this agreement with the state? That opens the doors for other people to be like, hey,
can we get this?
Do that too?
Can we do this?
Like, yeah, we get to do that too. We're going to enter into these contracts and have these, set up these private entities and things like that.
The rise of like special economic zones and, ZEDs, I think some of them are called zones of economic development.
By the way, Bitcoin is the legal tender of one of those zones in Honduras.
Yeah.
As of yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And Prospera?
Yes.
Yeah, sweet. So Prospera is, is one of these zones that is on the island of Roatan, which is part of Honduras. And I'm not surprised because one of our friends, Mr. Baumgar himself, is the president of that organization. Not an elected thing, it's like president of a company sort of deal. Anyway, Joel Baumgar is awesome, and he's for real and definitely understands. He understands the nature of money, and he understands why the importance of Bitcoin and why that's going to be a big deal in Prospera. He wants Prospera to be the most crypto-friendly place on earth, basically.
That's
better
awesome.
than Disney.
Yeah. It'll be crypto Disneyland.
It'll be crypto Disneyland. No, it's I mean, I have high hopes for Prospera. If I were a Bitcoin whale, I'd be looking into that pretty darn heavily. So at this point, but I'd want in on that.
Can I read something quick, guys?
Okay.
From so that people understand what's going on in corporate America or corporate or whatever you want. From The Week, the name of the article is "Culture War in the Magic Kingdom" by Samuel Goldman. The aspiration to neutrality was once typical of mass market brands. However, it's not possible. The pressure isn't coming from consumers who demand animated entertainment, athletic shoes, and other goods to take stance on every conceivable issue. It comes largely from employees who tend to be younger, more urban, and more culturally progressive than the markets they serve. So the big issue, guys, is it's not even the owners, it's not even the CEOs. It's just an issue that the culture inside workers try to push. They've been trying to make everything political, including your job.
So everybody sign up your high schoolers for my Liberty seminar, and I will teach them economics so that they don't make these same mistakes.
Hey, there you go.
So they go to work.
Well, so that's it's pretty interesting, because I think that there's something to be learned here, or at least to observe. And I would love to see, I agree with you, Carrie, that I would love to see this litigated. I'd love to see this, actually, strangely enough, come out on top for Disney in a way, because even though I disagree with some ways in which Disney has behaved, these sorts of opportunities should be more available. I mean,
right.
Ludwig von Mises, I believe, once said that, every, I'm paraphrasing, this isn't quite right, but like every tax loophole is a gift from God. And I think that likewise, every type of special tax status like this should be considered accordingly. And we need more of these types of experiments rather than fewer.
Right.
So I I disagree with the way in which that this, DeSantis has tried to, really go off on eliminating this zone, or whatever this arrangement, ultimately is. I hope that it is vindicated as being a benefit for humanity, because Lord knows that surely the federal government and state governments are not on our side here.
Right.
They may purport to be, but they are not. And so I think it's pretty interesting to see how this is going to proceed. That's for sure.
It'll be interesting for sure.
I think one final note here with respect to the way in which these corporations go and woke, and there's that phrase that's around like go woke, go broke. I think that there's a bit of confusion there, in as much as that there's a calculus going on at the leadership side of these things. Because what a C-suite has to be thinking in these types of situations is they are balancing the ability for them to continue providing the good and service whatever that the market wants, and the ability of their employees to actually produce it. Mm-hmm. So there is this sense in which they may be caught between the rock and the hard place, because the other thing they want to do is make sure that they walk away with their golden parachutes at the end of their tenure, because C-suites don't last forever. They do cycle, because that is the way of these things. Not a lot of companies operate with the same CEO for much longer than 5 to 10 years max. And that's somewhat by design. There's reasons why that plays out the way that it does, and we don't need to get into that here. But these folks do, at some point go like, all right, we've got to produce, the shareholder value needs to be there, and I got to walk away with something. That's what they're going to then. So they want their golden parachute. So what are they going to do? They're going to try and figure out some balance that makes sense, to where, relatively speaking, they're trying to walk away with their benefit.
Right.
Because they're self-interested. They always will be. And so there's no doubt about that. So even if, the C-suite is operating, personally, they're more not woke in this regard, they run up against the potential challenge of, they have to read the room, and we should make no mistake, CEOs know how to read rooms. So I'm not necessarily one to say that, well, they should be free of criticism because of these types of situations, but understand what the dynamics of how these things work. I mean, guys, it's a different world when you're living in the C-suite and making decisions over those than kind of what we peons, we plebs see on this side of things. It's different, and it shouldn't be underestimated. So I don't envy that position.
Yep, I hear you.
That's for sure. It doesn't mean that they're free from, or exempt from criticism. It doesn't mean that they're always going to make the right decision. We know that CEOs make a lot of wrong decisions.
Yeah.
But it is not as simple as we would like to think sometimes.
If it's private, it means that the government cannot cover your losses of your mistakes. So that's why we should criticize the private sector.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in order to make sure that their losses don't get covered by somebody else, we need to make sure that everything's private, so that nobody can go to get tax money to cover their mistakes. So yes, we should criticize private enterprises, and we should privatize everything. So we should continue.
Yep.
There you go. Well, so I think that kind of covers. Oh, man, we even went longer on 2 topics than I thought we might. But hey,
we have a third one, right?
We almost had a third one. Yeah. Well, it's been good. It's been good to cover this with you. I hope that everybody learned something tonight. And until next time, this has been Good News, Bad News. Please give us a like and subscribe, if you will. At the bottom, do the typical YouTube drivel. And if you're listening to us on an audio podcast, well, thank you as well. And please give us a rating, if you will, and check out our other podcasts. Check us out at libertarianchristians.com. And also you can, of course, reach us at podcast@libertarianchristians.com. If you want to comment, if you want to give us a question, we'd love to hear from you. We appreciate your feedback. And until next time, hey, we've had a good time here, and we'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.